Hello, we're glad you're still watching Morning at NTV, and welcome from that Kickstarter where the chairperson of Kasita was trying to put it to context just about what is happening in the economy and how you can cope. But most importantly, making an impassioned plea to the government to be able to work on some of the economic fundamentals to ensure the kind of peace in trade and business that traders are looking for. Now, let's go into something related to what is happening within the economy. Of course, we know out there that you are grappling with the price of commodities and inability to access some of the key services there. Now, you, the average Ugandan perhaps, Chris Higenyi, you going into an office, another is walking to work, another is also perhaps driving the car, but in very limited, of course, resources in terms of fuel. But have you sat down and thought about the old grandmother in the village, the underprivileged, the young boy who is unable to make it to school, who is unable to feed because, well, they don't know where the food is going to come from because either dad or mom is unable to actually be able to provide, or they're even not there and are orphaned? Those are people we perhaps should be looking at, the vulnerable in society. Joining me to discuss social protection in the wake of the hardships in the economy is coordinator of the Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, Patrick Kichoncho Katabazi. Many thanks for joining us. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Chris, and good morning to our viewers, and it's my pleasure to be on this show.
Yeah, thank you very much for making time. Now, before we even go any further, we know what we are going through, and on average somebody can say we are better off to at least survive tomorrow and the other day, but there are people within society that we know are already grappling with conditions that are either pre-existing or conditioned by the hardships that they go through, including the vulnerable, the elderly who are getting some money, including under the SAGE arrangement, the 23,000 shillings. Those ones are grappling with a lot of issues. Just take us through the state of social protection as we speak right now.
Social protection coverage in Uganda is still very low. You have, for example, older persons who are benefiting under the social assistance grants for empowerment, particularly the senior citizens grant. You have, out of our estimated 2.5 million older persons, I mean, I'm talking about people who are 65 years and above, you have less than 370 who are currently on the program. Workers, I'm talking about people who are gainfully employed and under the catchment of NSSF. You have an estimated 2 million Ugandans under that program, and about 900,000 Ugandans actively contributing. Then, and we have many other social protection programs running in the country. You have the Public Works program that covers not more than 20,000 youth under that program. You have many people not considerably covered under the social security, other social security schemes. For traders like the Mazima, which possibly has less than 10,000 people. And you also have not many Ugandans covered under the health insurance scheme. So I can say that most of us are still under the traditional social protection mechanisms where society is supposed to take care of older people, where society is supposed to look after the children. Sadly, the case is that those social protection bonds that existed long before are not existing anymore. Some of them are breaking down because of the economic hardships that we're experiencing, because of the urbanization that is coming up, and also because of the monetarization of the economy right now. Everybody is looking for money as a way of survival. Previously, people were looking at food possibly as a rallying point, but now people are looking at so many other things that didn't exist in our societies before. And that's why we need to look at new approaches that can help reduce risks and vulnerabilities in our society. Okay,
we shall be speaking, or rather looking a little deeper into the extended family infrastructure network, so to speak, to be able to sustain people's lifestyle, and whether it's a model that can actually be taken on or something that should be improved by the, of course, the technocrats can discuss and see how exactly that can be improved. However, the realities of the moment are very harsh. The elderly, the vulnerable, including those that we already know, including street children and so forth, How are they coping? Is there a mechanism? Is there a rollout of interventions by sector players to ensure that during these very particularly hard times, they are able to cope?
You see, the poverty situation in Uganda is very complex. It is difficult to tell whether somebody is rich or poor. When you compare the household survey of 2006, then 2011, and the most recent ones, you discover that a big chunk of people who were vulnerable about possibly 10 years ago took a step and became much better. But then you also notice that there are some people who were very, very well to do then, but again who slid back. And this is precisely because our economy largely relies on agriculture, up to about 67% right now. And this is affected by so many factors, whether we are relying on wind-fed agriculture. So if there is a disruption, drought or otherwise, it causes turbulence in our economic status. So that's why you find the rich guy 10 years ago is possibly a poor man today. So when we are analyzing vulnerability in Uganda, we need to take into account the fact that most of us, including those who are employed, if you're cut off from employment, 2 months, you slide into poverty that is unimaginable. And that's why I think a situation like this one is extremely dire, where all of a sudden prices are rising, but even if you're employed, your salaries or your income stagnant, but in some cases have gone away because during we are still trying to recover from the pandemic. It is still on. Businesses were closed. Most people lost their jobs. Most people retreated, perhaps in the rural communities. But then you're waking up to buy a bar of soap that used to be about 3,000 at 8,000, 10,000 and the like. If you have a car or a motorcycle that you're using to take your child to school, you left off, where the pandemic possibly eased a bit and the lockdown was lifted, you were at 3,500 or 600,000, and now you're finding yourself paying close to 6,000 in some communities. And that wipes away even the little saving that you could have made. And that's is something that, this is the debate that we need to have as Ugandans, and then start devising both public and private interventions that should be able to help people understand this situation much better, but in some way cushion them. I'll give an example. One of the programs that, for example, government has rolled out, the Social Assistance Grants for Empowerment. So this is a program that currently targets older people who are 60, who are in the original design 65 years and above, but because of limited resources, government increased the age to 80 so that now the program can be spread throughout the whole country. That was
very interesting.
So now we've been pushing that this program, the age of eligibility gets reduced to at least 75 and progressively lowered to 65. But again, you still find, like for example, in the next year's budget, you still find that there's a funding gap of 26 billion. But in addition,
towards SAGE.
Yes, towards SAGE as an example. But in addition, you still realize that government has not been providing the necessary funds to the extent that we have 36 billion as accumulated arrears. So we are in a crisis. Somebody has not received payments for about 5 months. And what
these are SAGE payments.
These are SAGE payments.
That is 25,000.
Yes, per month
hasn't been paid to beneficiaries.
Yes, to beneficiaries
for the last 6 months.
So in some cases, not all. Some are at par. Some, because enrollment did not happen at once. Districts got enrolled one by one.
That's right.
So there are those that are experiencing arrears. And then you notice that again in the coming budget, you'll find that out of the 36 billion in arrears, then you have 14 billion that is being budgeted to cater for the arrears. So then you have a problem of funding up of 26 billion. You have a problem of now arrears, because now that will take it about 21 billion. So if you add together, you'll have about 47 now 47 billion, again, that will translate into arrears, and you'll have a song of arrears.
And what is the likelihood in the short term or even the immediate term for that to be rectified? Is there like a likelihood?
Yes, the likelihood could be possibly if resources become available and budget cuts everywhere, supplementary budget for this gap, which again probably is. So now, we are in a problem of rising commodity prices, and we are putting this small amount of money to help an old person, somebody who is 80 years, somebody who cannot farm, somebody who cannot meaningfully participate in government programs, somebody you thought that actually their value would possibly be enhanced by enabling this person to buy a bar of soap, but a bar of soap has risen from 2,000 to 10,000. Yeah. So you're even giving this person 25,000, the value is still less, but even again it isn't coming because you have areas that are coming into play. So that's possibly then one area. Of course, again, people in the private sector, especially those who had lined up for the 20%, yes, we are glad.
NSSF.
People were saying that money isn't in NSSF. We are glad that NSSF is actually had the money
rolling it out
and is paying the people, those who qualify and those who need
and that's
this
a very
kind of
minimal
money.
number, and it's very unlikely that the rollout of that money would actually improve conditions for much on aggregate level for the economy. I know a few people could get that money and be able to improve a thing or two, but aggregately, I do not see a significant shift in improvements and transformation. That means at the end of the day, such interventions are not actually very realistic at the end of the day. But talking about social protection and models that can perhaps be integrated to ensure that there is ability to meet some of these pressures, including rise in prices and any other economic pressures that might arise, because what we are seeing now is that inflation could peak in the second quarter of the next year. That's according to the Deputy Governor for the Bank of Uganda. Where are we heading? Do you see a crisis deepening?
Okay, we've made these projections before, and my still projection remains that this crisis of rising prices cannot be analyzed in the short term.
Yeah, sure.
It is possibly to the medium and long term, and that's why we need to tighten the belts. Although somebody asked whether we even have the money to buy the money to buy the belts. So we need to tighten the belts.
Interesting.
We need to tame our consumption partners, and I associate myself with what the president advised, that we need to be frugal in the way we spend. Although, of course, again, the reports that come through indicate that some people are supposed to be in charge of managing affairs are not as frugal as they want us to be. Yeah. And that is where the problem is.
There is one
but also, the issue of social protection cannot be looked at in isolation. If you do not have other segments of the economy working properly, policies fitting in together, then you still have a cycle of vulnerability coming up and coming up. I want to give you an example. Business vulnerability, because you see, we're also talking about formal and possibly informal sector. In my home village in Rwamchuchu, Rushebeya, there's a petrol station, for example, that had started. Now, when I was last there, it is not working. Why is it not working? Because of the fluctuation of oil prices, it's now the big boys in the oil industry that are staying afloat, because they have a lot of capital, they can project, they can invest. So the smaller businesses are also dying out in a way. So somebody or a family that has been depending on that small petrol station, one pump petrol station, is going to be vulnerable because they were making some little money to keep the families afloat. So what would you want in an economy like this one to happen? You want a competitions reform or a competitions law. Yeah. Because here we are having some issues of anti-competition where the big boys can, even collude, set prices, edge out the small guys.
And that is being seen with oil marketers.
Yes, so we need to have reform in the way we deal with our petroleum products and the way we sell them, so that we eliminate hoarding, we eliminate anti-competition. And if there is somebody who is not playing by the rules, then there is a body that is responsible for dealing with them. Right now, the Minister of Energy just sets indicative prices for other players to follow, but there are no clear-cut sanctions that are ably embedded in the law to prevent some of these.
As a policy analyst and social activist, I'm sure you do know that developments, especially with regard to how technocrats are handling this particular crisis, have brought their own reputation into the spotlight. For example, if easing pain for the economy or the average Ugandan is not something that really requires rocket science. But recently, somebody told us that subsidies, do not work and are not sustainable. Why? I could get another reason why subsidies are not sustainable, but to tell me that those who are going to benefit are the rich or the cartels, so we cannot implement that. It speaks to the fact that why are even cartels there? Or why are those rich people able to manipulate the system to be able to be the ones to benefit most? Isn't that a case of failing the country as economists?
No, I don't think this is the case.
Yeah.
Now,
what is it then?
Now, what we are seeing right now in the world is a crisis of contradictions within economic policy management.
Contradiction.
Yes, we are now dealing with the contradictions.
Yeah.
Recently, the President of the United States of America was very categorical. This is now the parent of capitalism, the one that we're implementing right now.
The Guardian.
And he said, the economics, the trickle-down economics is not working anymore.
Yeah.
That if you put money in the hands of the private sector, that this money is going to trickle down to the man on the ground. This isn't working anymore. What you want is now to put money where people belong. And possibly, I think that's why even our economic policy is evolving. That's why you have the parish development model, for example, and wanting to spend money at the grassroots where people are. And so what we are seeing is a crisis. That here in Uganda, you have the economy that is running on the forces of demand and supply with limited regulation, private-led economy. So you have a crisis that has come. You didn't plan for it, you didn't envisage it, but then you want to have interventions implemented on day one.
On day one.
That run contrary to the existing forces of demand and supply that have been put in place.
Planning is one thing.
So meaning that you might not, you need a lot of time.
A lot of time, no?
To plan, to put reform.
And that is why there are short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions to some of these crises.
So for example, during the COVID era, when we had a short-term intervention, for example, like distribution of food, and the otherwise known as Nebanja money. That ordinarily would be those short-term interventions. You're still waiting.
Still waiting.
So those are short-term, as we always say. But the long-term ones, we need to rethink our economic model right now. And for me, I've always argued that a low-developing country cannot develop at a higher speed if they are relying solely on the forces of demand and supply. Because of the nature of our circumstances, there are some people who can never fit into the forces of demand and supply. You are born in high vulnerability. Without a hand, you simply go to the market and see other people shopping and go home. You have a country that has illiteracy levels that are extremely high.
Very, very high.
You have an economy that is not highly integrated. There are some communities in Uganda right now where in a sub-county, the aggregate possibly expenditure for a person, you find somebody that cannot spend 10,000 in the entire year. I mean, if we are using expenditure as a proxy of income. So you find somebody then is taken to say that he cannot earn 10,000 possibly in the year. So you're dealing with an economy like that. So if you if you hand everything to private sector, then you are going to edge out some people, and that's what we are seeing. And we hope we learn from this kind of crisis, and we'll be able to put interventions in place.
No doubt, we hope, of course, the people who need to learn, and most importantly, we also be able to learn that we need to be very, very frugal. And now, what exactly, just in 30 seconds, what can be done to help the vulnerable right now? Handouts?
No, okay. For me, there are so many things that government can do right now.
Very quickly, yeah.
You have traders, business persons, including small business people at the grassroots, who have traded with government, and the government has not paid them.
That's right.
You've had the issue. Yes, you have had the issue of rising domestic arrears as a priority. Government pays it's that in a way restricts the economy and also cushions people at that level, and there are quite a number of people. Secondly, we need consumer protection laws. We need to jump in because we also know there are some traders who are making a killing at the expense of people's lives. So we need to jump in and fix that one very fast because we are dealing with both real prices and artificial prices in our community. That, I think, is also very important. Also, then finally, we need to do reform so that at the end of the day, we prepare for crises like this as they come, so that we have corrected. We don't now start arguing, it's okay, incentives cannot work, reduction cannot work. We need to have a system that is in place to respond to shocks. And the single registry is also very important. Identify vulnerable people. Because you remember the neighbor hasn't reached you.
Doesn't reach.
Yet possibly you deserved, I guess. So we need this. We need our single registry that has been started at the Ministry of General and Social Development to work, so that at any one time, if we discover that there is a community that is highly vulnerable and we need an intervention, We don't start saying policy, now, system, so we just roll on
All
and
right.
get running.
Thank you very much.